So something happened not so recently in the Jiu Jitsu world that, since I really don't pay close attention to that, I didn't really know about. A man ended up receiving millions of dollars as the result of a lawsuit that occurred after a catastrophic and life-changing injury that he received while practicing Jiu Jitsu. The man named Greener, and I apologize if I'm saying that name wrong, ended up having his neck broken when an instructor tried to do a high-level move on him during a roll. This is an obvious tragedy, and really no amount of money is going to give this guy back his quality of life. Now, while I'm far from the first person to discuss this occurrence, I have noticed that people kind of tend to focus on and say the same things about this, and I feel like they're missing the forest for the trees. And in this video, I'd like to go through as much of the scenario as we can so that I can give as much of my opinion as I possibly can on every facet of what ended up happening. So to begin, we're going to be taking a look at the video of the neck break itself, and I want to say that if you're a little bit squeamish, you may want to end up skipping through this. So what we have here may be a little bit confusing to anyone who's not really that familiar with Jiu Jitsu, and to make it a little bit easier, I actually used some of the altered footage from the court case so that it's a little bit easier to tell who's who. We have Greener, who's taken the turtle position, which means that he's balled up on the ground facing downward, and we have his instructor, Mr. Iturralde, who's trying to get his hooks and his seatbelt in. The purported move that was being attempted was called the Leao Vieira back take, which is a very high-level move. It's very delicate and very particular. By now, I think it goes without saying that something went wrong. Greener's head ended up getting pinned to the ground, and both of their bodies ended up rolling in a way that caused Greener to break his neck. It's really horrible to see a life altered in such a sudden and drastic way, but we have to be able to look this in the face if we're going to figure out exactly what happened, and also, more importantly, how to make sure it doesn't happen again. So to my understanding, Greener was actually a collegiate wrestler, but he was only a white belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and this is a stark contrast to a black belt in Jiu Jitsu, especially a black belt competitor, which is at the time what Iturralde was. I've seen some people using the rumors of him being a collegiate wrestler as some kind of weapon to try and fend off any accusations of bullying a white belt, but the thing is, a wrestler is not a jiu-jitsu black belt. They are two different things. Wrestling doesn't have a turtle position. It's not really a thing. There is something that's a little bit similar, but it's not similar enough as to where you could just take the wrestling version of that and bring it over to jiu-jitsu. Chances are he didn't know exactly what was going on, especially when Iturralde went for that move. In collegiate wrestling, you're not allowed to lock your hands when you're on the ground, and people typically don't perform rolling back takes. The objectives and the positions are different, therefore they're going to be trained differently. Part of both sports is learning how to roll and how to fall as efficiently and safely as possible, but you're also only going to learn what's relevant to the sport that you're training in. As an example, I didn't actually learn how to slap out from wrestling. That's only something you really learn in jiu-jitsu and judo. And with all that said, if there's no rolling back takes and there's no locked hands on the ground, then you're not going to have to learn how to defend those things because they're irrelevant to you. Because of these facts, it's really impossible for me to see this as anything other than irresponsible behavior on the part of the instructor, but also ignorance on the part of the student. You can't really blame Greener for not knowing better, but you can 100% blame the coach. And even then, I do think it goes a little bit deeper than one guy making a mistake or acting irresponsibly. Jiu-jitsu has this deep running dark side that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and if they do talk about it, they typically try and make it into some kind of cute joke, like it's quirky or something like that. People seem to think that because it's called the gentle art, you can go as hard as you want all the time and nothing bad's gonna happen, when really people get hurt in jiu-jitsu more than anything else because of the constant movements and sudden shifts in weight. What also tends to exacerbate this is the fact that jiu-jitsu guys tend to have the biggest egos out of anyone in martial arts. And not only are these egos unearned a lot of the time, but they're also extremely dangerous. There's this weird culture of mercilessly beating up on white belts, not telling people to cool it when they're going too hard, and everyone is always trying to hit that cool move they found on the internet. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this guy never actually learned that move from an instructor. He just went on YouTube one day and he ended up finding it and he decided, you know what, I'm gonna try this until I get it. We even have kids at my gym who come in and they just out of nowhere pull out these weird moves that are actually like really dangerous and that they're not even allowed to do at their age. And we have to pull these people aside and say, hey, stop watching YouTube Jiu-Jitsu. Now, with everything that I've said thus far, I think we can all agree that it's a very messed up scenario, and I don't think anyone wanted it to go down that way. And the instructor actually released a video where he tried to explain what was going on in the video from his point of view. And we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take a look at that now.
that I enjoy doing. And this is what you may try when you have a very strong partner that is not allowing you to roll him over the shoulder, okay? So let's say we made our way to the back, right? I'm gonna go for a modified seat belt. So instead of going over the shoulder, I'm gonna go around his biceps, okay? This is gonna be a lot better for chopping this leg of the table. That way, when I roll just a little bit over the side, my partner's gonna fall over because he has no base over his side. So the only way my partner can roll, or I'm forcing him to roll, is over his left side, right? So we're gonna go right here. Now the easy way of doing this technique, or the basic way, is just stay tight and rolling over the shoulder, opening the leg wide, so I can make my partner roll. Now let's say my partner has a better base, and he doesn't fall over this side. Maybe I tried already to take it back on a roll before, or doing this same roll, and he's not falling for it. So I'm gonna do a modified version, and this is gonna allow me to distract my partner so I can redirect him into the other side. So check it out. So from here, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna lift up, and I'm gonna base with my foot right next to his head. Once I base there, I'm gonna bring my knee over his other side, and then roll him all the way over and secure the back. As you can see, my partner has no arm right there, so I can just bring it around here, start attacking on the armbar. I'm gonna let go of the seat. When my partner wants to sit up, once he starts to sit up, let's sit up item, push his face, and go straight on the armbar too. Alright, so I'm gonna show you one more time. So once we make it to the back, we got our modified seat belt, lean way into my partner, lift up 1, 2, all the way over, and we can work on the choke to block this side. I'm gonna post a video too on the do's and don'ts for the person who's receiving this technique. What should you do to escape, and what you should not do in order to find a way out of it.
So this whole video is really strange, and honestly it just kind of comes off as him trying to cover his own ass. He was supposedly going for the Leao Vieira back take, but the move that he was showing in his video was clearly not the same move that he ended up trying to go for in the court video. I understand people have different ways of doing things, but I have never seen anyone ever need that much momentum to be able to create an opening to get hooks in. That modified seatbelt is kind of reminiscent of a 2-on-1, which is something that I'm very familiar with, and I can tell you that it really kind of takes away the need to roll in the first place. The point of a rolling back take is to try and open up the body enough as to where you can get hooks in, and a 2-on-1 does that on its own. And even if you were to use a 2-on-1 in conjunction with a roll, you don't need to roll over the dude's head. You can just roll to the side of the arm that you have trapped. There's nothing there for him to post with. So overall, I really don't understand exactly what he was trying to go for with this video. I mean, I kind of do, but I don't 100% see what he was thinking when he ended up putting this video out. Overall, it really doesn't help his case much, and if anything, it just kind of makes him look like he doesn't really know what he's doing. But besides that, there was some controversy along with the court case that ended up occurring with Rener Gracie, and we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take a look at some of what he ended up saying during that case that made everybody so mad. So here I have a Reddit post that I'm gonna make available in the description of this video. I'm just gonna go ahead and read, and I'm gonna tell you what I think of all of it, because people were really upset at him about this, and I guess I can understand some of it, but not exactly all of it. Direct quotes from Rener during the trial. This is from the deposition, not the testimony or the cross-examination. And I don't really know what the difference between those three things are, so if you do and you want to give a little bit more context, definitely feel free to. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu are from white to blue to purple to brown to black to red, with the red belt rank being the most advanced rank in the sport. The white belt is the least advanced rank in the sport and denotes a beginner with little to no experience. Okay, this is true. It is industry custom for beginners to have courses separate and apart from advanced practitioners so as to ensure the beginners receive the proper care and attention. Pursuant to industry standards, beginners should complete an introductory course to learn basic techniques in a safe and responsible way without the dangerous maneuvers that are used at more advanced levels. And I will start off by saying that there is no such thing as an industry standard. Everybody does it a little bit differently. Maybe that's the standard inside of whatever school Rener has. I think he has his own little brand and things like that. I'm not a jiu-jitsu politics guy. That's not my thing. But overall, there is no such thing as an industry standard, so I guess I could understand why people would be a little bit off-put by that. However, what he had to say about these apparent industry standards is true. What you will usually have is people on their first day not exactly going as hard as they could or learning the most advanced moves that they could. Typically, they'll be taken aside with either an advanced student who will teach them the basics, or maybe there's even an instructor that will be dedicated to teaching them the basics. This is true, and I don't have a problem with that. I guess I could understand why somebody would be mad about industry standards, though, because that ends up establishing a precedent in the court system. Immediately prior to his injury, Mr. Greener was in a defensive position known as turtle position, essentially balled up on the mat with his face down. If an opponent is in turtle position, the goal was to safely put that person on their side or to take the back. There are many ways to take the back of a person in turtle position. To take the back of a person in turtle position, one could put their feet inside to secure the back, one could move to the side and knock them off balance with a knee and then lock legs around them, but the safest method is to just pull the person onto their side. On the day of the incident, Mr. Iturralde did not use any of the traditional methods to take Mr. Greener's back. This is true. This is basically what I was getting at a second ago when I was going over Iturralde's video. Instead of performing a routine and safe back take, Mr. Iturralde pinned Mr. Greener to the mat and put all his pressure on Mr. Greener's neck and jumped with both feet in the air, attempting to perform a front flip. The maneuver which Mr. Iturralde attempted was an extremely dangerous technique known as a forward flip back take, which is used by only the most experienced of practitioners, and even then is typically only applied to equally skilled opponents who have received extensive training on how to properly receive the technique without sustaining crippling injuries. This is true. I don't know what the issue is. It is industry custom that instructors have discretion over which Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu techniques to teach. It is contrary to industry custom for an instructor to perform a forward flip back take on anyone who has not received extensive instruction and practice on the technique. Now, I have to agree with this. Even though he's using the industry standard thing again, which is really weird, I personally have never tried this on anyone, and I don't think I would try it on anyone. And if I did, I'd only try it on someone who was a brown or a black belt like myself. I've also never seen anyone ever do that move in real life. And in fact, I see it so infrequently that I forget it exists half the time. The first time I ever saw it was on an episode of The Ultimate Fighter. There was this guy, his name was like Anton Grossman or Gross or something like that. It was way back in 2014. I saw that move, I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then I told myself immediately, I'm not gonna bother trying it. And I actually went against that once. I tried it one day while I was messing around during a roll and I botched it. And luckily nothing bad ended up happening. I just lost what was a strong position. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu without a forward flip back take is common and normal. The forward flip back take is not a fundamental or essential technique of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Instructional sparring and competitive martial arts are starkly different, such that they are essentially two distinct activities. Competitors at the highest level of martial arts use techniques which are not commonly utilized during instructional sparring. A dichotomy exists between the risks in upper echelon competitions and instructional sparring during a class. The forward flip back take is not typically performed in instructional sparring, particularly where a practitioner receiving the technique is of a lower rank or skill level. Now, you see, this one's a little weird because it's half right and half wrong. First off, what is instructional sparring? There's no such thing as that. You're either sparring or you're doing instructionals. There's no in between. In addition to this, in sparring, that's where a lot of people will test out a bunch of different kinds of moves. They'll test out that new thing that they ended up learning. Or, unfortunately, as I said, sometimes they'll test out that thing that they saw on YouTube. This is kind of a weird statement to make because, as I said, it's kind of like half truth, half falsehood. And it just kind of, it makes me wonder what was going on, really. Overall, I guess I can understand why some people might be a little bit upset at Renner for what he ended up saying, but I don't necessarily think it means that he sold out or anything like that. I think he was just in kind of a weird position. Courtrooms are weird. Overall, what I want to do with all the information that we have is try and come to a conclusion as to how we can avoid what ended up happening. Now, I've done a little bit of thinking, and I may not have the answers to every little thing under the sun, but I do want to share with you some of the things that I've been thinking about and the conclusions that I've come to. So after seeing all this, we have to ask what conclusions we can draw from all of it. It's not like we have the authority to take away belts or certifications, and we wouldn't even want to do that anyway. And unfortunately, we also can't give Greener any form of compensation that's going to replace his quality of life. What we can do, though, is try to study this so that we can ensure that this is a lot less likely to happen in the future, which is what I've been trying to do this whole time. And the conclusions that I've come to are as follows. Turtle position is generally a bad idea, which is why I don't tend to play around with it in the first place. It's a sport jiu-jitsu position with very few long-term benefits to it. Even in wrestling, where they have the referee's position, which is very similar to turtle, you're not meant to stay in it. You're trying to get out of it immediately. And I do know there's ways to go on the attack from turtle position. It's just that I'm more interested in lower risk, higher reward moves and positions. The Vieira back take is unnecessary. It may look cool, but there's ways to take the back that are a lot better and safer for both you and him. When I got to thinking about it, it actually kind of reminded me of that scissor takedown that people were using that was blowing people's knees out, and that ended up getting banned. And while I'm not saying we need to ban the Vieira back take, I'm just saying that we need to be a little bit more careful and thoughtful about this type of thing. I really just think the culture around trying new moves needs to change, and if you see a white belt or even a black belt that's under your tutelage that's trying a move that you didn't even teach them, or maybe you don't even know the move yourself, you should probably tell them to knock it off. And this actually leads me to the next point. YouTube Jiu-Jitsu is poisonous to people because nobody ever uses it to double-check fundamentals or to try and learn variations to moves and positions they already know. Instead, everybody uses it to learn moves that are either above their pay grade or just simply aren't that worth putting effort into. And I'm sorry to say, but I think that a lot of these websites and online programs and other things like that are partially to blame for the culture being the way that it is. I'm not trying to say they share any fault or liability in this specific instance, though. People are pretty upset at Henner about everything he ended up saying during the trial, but the video he ended up putting out after the trial explained everything pretty well in my opinion. As a witness in a legal case, he's only allowed to answer the questions that he's asked. He can't just be going on a diatribe about things that he wasn't asked about, and if a certain question demands a certain answer, then he by law is required to give that answer. Unfortunately, most judges and lawyers are simply not interested in the history of or the politics surrounding Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're only interested in the questions and answers that are relevant to their case. Also, like, what was he supposed to do? Was he just supposed to sell out the kid whose legs and arms don't work because some hotshot black belt botched a risky move? The dude's life is completely ruined compared to before. He can't work out like he used to. He's probably never gonna feel the touch of a woman again. It really kind of showed how awful some people in the jiu-jitsu scene are. It kind of disgusted me, if I'm being honest, because this guy really needed this, and it was the black belt's fault. But people are now mad at Henner for trying to help the kid out, I guess. I don't know. There were a lot of awful things that I saw regarding this case, and I think it really exposed just how many gross, like, sociopathic people are in jiu-jitsu. I think a lot of people were just a little bit too okay with the idea of selling Greener out if it meant that they were gonna get to save jiu-jitsu, or whatever they thought was gonna happen when the court ended up siding with the plaintiff. I think people are really just afraid of whatever legal ramifications the judgment may have. Do we ban the Vieira now? Do we have to be extra careful when doing things we've done without issue for years because there's a legal precedent in California? These are good questions that don't seem to have clear answers, but I don't think the answer lies in getting mad at Henner for doing what he thought he had to do at the time. At the end of the day, I don't think he's to blame if there are negative ramifications. I think it's the people and the culture that were playing too fast and loose for too long, and it finally ended up catching up with them. While I'm in no way trying to say this guy's a victim, I actually feel really bad for the instructor because he has to live with this now, and if he's not a scumbag, he probably feels an earth-shattering amount of guilt. I feel like he put that video out not just as a way to try and exonerate himself of any blame or anything like that, but also as a way to clear his conscience so that he could sleep at night, which I can't even say I blame him for. I think we need to remember that mishaps are a part of life, and we can always learn from them regardless of how we act or react to them. I don't think anyone involved woke up that morning thinking they were going to do irreparable harm to anyone, whether physical or financial. It's unfortunate that this happened, and I just hope that we can try to avoid it in the future. But that's all that I have for you today. If you're still watching right now, thank you very much, because I know this is a very long video compared to what I usually put out. But this is something that I feel very strongly about, to the point where even though it's been months since this happened, it's not really in the news anymore in the jiu-jitsu world, I figured I'd still try and finish it off. If you liked the video, leave a like and also sub for more. If you have anything to say, feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to hit me up on Instagram at Scott Sullivan MMA. I love making question and answer videos for people who are interested. Other than that, again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, good luck out there.